This American band had their very own FBI files in the 60s and 70s, but why were they being watched? MC5 formed in Michigan in 1963, a group of school friends who just wanted to start a band. Now this was a groundbreaking time in American history. The civil rights movement was in full force, the Vietnam War was raging on. Political factions had popped up everywhere, calling for an end to war and racism. And MC5 were well and truly on board with this. Their sound was explosive and matched the frustration a lot of young people were feeling at the time. Many consider MC5 to be the prototype of American hardcore punk and grunge. And for guitarist Wayne Kramer, it was all about bringing the energy. We were always striving because we wanted to put more energy into the music, and sometimes that translated into faster tempos and more volume and a denser tone. Their lyrics were also totally in your face. I mean, look at this first line from their most famous song, Kick Out the Jams. Kick out the jams, motherfucker! And unsurprisingly, the radio stations weren't exactly a fan of that one, so they initially recorded a radio-friendly version first with the hope that it would get super popular, then they would release the real version on the album. Kick out the jams, brothers and sisters! But it wasn't just their music that got them in hot water, it was also their politics. In their early days, they were managed by a man called John Sinclair, who was a founding member of the anti-racist White Panther Party. The party was created as a way for white anti-racists to support the Black Panther Party, and their core values aligned. They were militant and prepared to use violence if it came to it. MC5 enthusiastically joined this movement and spread the message whenever they could. Inspired by the likes of Malcolm X and anti-war movements, they believed that if change was going to happen, the people were going to have to force it to happen. We just were frustrated with the slow pace of change. We were anxious about the future, and we felt like we had to take action. And the action we took was in endorsing our idols, which were the Black Panther Party and Malcolm X. And we tried to bring all those ideas together in a message that our band could represent. The idea that you didn't have to go along with the program, that there was a better way that we could do things. Huge thanks to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. If you're an independent artist, this is for you. DistroKid is the easiest way to distribute your music to all the major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. You get unlimited music uploads for a low yearly price, and you keep 100% of your royalties. DistroKid doesn't take any commission. That is an awesome thing for artists. This company really wants to put artists first, as it absolutely should be, and that's why I'm so proud to be working with them. I just wish there was more of that in the music industry. It's super fast to upload too. Your music goes live on streaming services quicker than any other distributor. It's already trusted by millions of artists worldwide as well. Sign up to DistroKid using my link in the video description and start sharing your music with the world today. Back to it then. MC5 also stuck it to the man by performing at protests. In 1968, the Democratic National Convention took place. Social tensions had reached a new height that year, after the assassination of Martin Luther King in April, and the announcement by President Lyndon B. Johnson that he wouldn't be standing for re-election. The purpose of this convention was to find a new candidate in the Democratic Party to take his place. It therefore made the perfect time and place to protest. The Youth International Party, also known as the Yippies, staged an anti-war protest that thousands of people attended. The event became known as the Festival of Life. MC5 performed, although not without some issues. When they arrived, there was no stage or equipment, and a lesser band at this point might have called it a day, but they plugged their own equipment in through a concession stand and played like that. It seemed their performance would be a bit of an uphill battle, because false rumours started circulating that the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead would also be performing. But MC5 were well received by the crowd. However, it was clear things were getting serious. On the day of our appearance, the vibe was very heavy. There were agent provocateurs in the crowd provoking people to violence. The Chicago police were riding motorcycles through crowds of young people just to disrupt and hurt them. It wasn't like the usual outdoor music festival where everyone was smiling and it's all about rainbows, flowers, and peace. This was a decidedly different atmosphere. The tone was ominous. And this is where the FBI comes into it. They had already been surveilling John Sinclair and the White Panther Party, so by association, MC5 as well. The band requested files through the Freedom of Information Act, and it revealed what they had been thinking all this time. I know a great deal about what the federal government's attitude about the MC5 was, and it's very scary. The White House viewed the MC5 as a threat. We discovered through the Freedom of Information documents that go all the way to the top that the COINTELPRO program targeted the MC5 and the White Panther Party. Our phones were tapped, we were followed, we were systematically harassed, arrested, jailed in an effort by the federal government, the state government, and the city of Detroit. Their reputation was catching up with them, and it was catching up with John Sinclair too. Sinclair was a ticking time bomb. His politics and profile meant he was constantly being watched by the authorities, and it wasn't long until they found an excuse to lock him up. In 1969, Sinclair was arrested for possession of marijuana. He was slammed with a 10-year prison sentence, an extreme amount of time for that kind of crime. This was met with huge criticism, and Sinclair was eventually released in 1972, not long after the John Sinclair Freedom Rally, which featured performances from the likes of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Funnily enough, by this point, he had fallen out with MC5, so they didn't play this event. However, the association with these political movements throughout the 60s and 70s sadly made record labels view MC5 as a bit of a liability. Atlantic Records eventually dropped the band after the band's follow-up albums back in the USA, and High Time lost the label money. Personal problems were also emerging. Bassist Michael Davis left the band after a struggle with heroin addiction, and they struggled to find a suitable replacement. The band continued to crawl along for the rest of the year until finally performing a farewell show on New Year's Eve. Kramer, in the middle of his own battle with addiction, was so upset he left the stage only a few songs in, and MC5 disbanded not long after. It went from bad to worse for the personal lives of some of the members. In 1975, Kramer was caught selling drugs and spent 5 years behind bars in Kentucky. And funnily enough, he was reunited with his former bandmate Michael Davis while in prison, also there for drug charges. Kramer's love of music continued during his time in prison, and when he was eventually released in 1979, he went on to release some solo music. However, that wasn't the end of MC5. They actually reunited in 1992 and continued to play and tour until Kramer's death in 2024, leaving behind this legacy of sticking it to the man and putting politics at the centre of music. And it wouldn't be the first time the FBI got involved in the music industry. How about the time a mob boss owned a record label? He even threatened John Lennon's life. I've got a full video on that over here.